as we look. Yeah, there you go. Appreciate that. So it's a story about strength, courage, faithfulness, and peace. So go to that next one, Brother Lucas, because tonight we're going to be, what I usually like to do with the book, I don't like to just start in and run through it. I really like to get an overview. I'd like to get sort of a higher elevated view of the book, do a little bit of back history of how Joshua's got to where he is, because this is a story within a story. And so we want to look. There will be several scriptures tonight. There's a lot of ground to cover I'd like to get through tonight. But we'll read several verses in chapter 1, but then we're going to back up and get some facts, some history, and things about Moses and Joshua and things like that. But what you're going to see broadly in this book, it requires strength. The Christian life's not an easy life. Who would agree? And we don't need to. The wrong prayer to pray is, God, give me an easy life. Really, what we need to be praying is that God give me strength to live the life you have before me. Because the Christian life, as you're going to learn through Joshua's life leading the children of Israel, is that there's difficulties, there's challenges, there's battles to face. And so it's very encouraging because we all go through battles, right? I mean, you go through battles as a Christian? We all do. And but let's pick up in verse 1 and just see where Joshua is, and then we'll step through an overview of the book tonight. Verse 1, it says, Now after the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord, it came to pass that the Lord spake unto Joshua, the son of Nun, Moses' minister, saying, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now therefore arise, go over this Jordan, thou and all this people unto the land which I do give to them, even to the children of Israel. Every place that the sole of your foot shall tread upon, that have I given unto you, as I said unto Moses, from the wilderness and this Lebanon, even unto the great river, the river Euphrates. All the land of the Hittites and under the great sea, toward the going down of the sun, shall be your coast. There shall not any man be able to stand before thee all the days of thy life. As I was with Moses, so will I be with thee. I will not fail thee, nor forsake thee. Be strong and of good courage. That's a phrase you're going to hear as we look back in Deuteronomy and Numbers. You're going to see this recurring encouragement. For unto this people shalt thou divide for an inheritance the land which I swear unto their fathers to give them. Only be thou strong and very courageous, that thou mayest observe to do according to all the law which Moses my servant commanded thee. Turn not from it to the right hand or to the left, that thou mayest prosper whithersoever thou goest. This book of the law shall not depart out of thy mouth, but thou shalt meditate therein day and night, that thou mayest observe to do according to all that is written therein. For then thou shalt make thy way prosperous, and then thou shalt have good success. Have I not commanded thee? Be strong and of a good courage. Be not afraid, neither be dismayed. For the Lord thy God is with thee, whithersoever thou goest. Okay? When you look at the book of Joshua, Joshua is the beginning, what we would call these books of history. A lot of the historical books, if you will. And there's history you're going to find throughout all of Scripture, referencing history, but you're going to get into some major history books here in Scripture. And again, what we're going to be journeying in the book of Joshua is a journey to the Promised Land. All right? And we're going to get a little bit of backstory about Moses and what transition there, why there was a transition. But this is a journey. And as we think about that, it gives us a clear picture that the Christian life is a journey. Okay, it's not just one day and done. Every day is a journey to, God's blessing, God's perfect will for your life. I was talking to a brother over here. He said, I think I'm in God's plan. He said, I'm healthy and doing well, and I hope I'm there. And I said, well, you just keep trucking and keep following the Lord, and you'll be right where you need to be. Interestingly, the book of Joshua, anybody guess how many years possibly was covered in the book of Joshua? Pop quiz. Everybody's like, oh, I didn't want this. Hey, we have a winner. You don't have to tell where you got it. You just have to give the answer. I'm not going to ask you. But about 26 years roughly. That was, and that's a good thing to keep in mind, because have you ever fell prey to thinking like, especially in the New Testament, he was there, they were here, and then they were there, and then they were there, and they were there. Sort of how it's written sometimes. And you lose sight of how much time has passed, right? And that's helpful in the Christian life as well. Because you think, man, I've already got this area of my life whooped and been to this next thing. Like, look how quick they moved in Scripture. Well, oftentimes they moved very slowly. And the Christian life is a step at a time. So that's a great help there. And as you learned here in verse 1 and in verse 2, that there is a transition, there is a passing of the baton. Moses is dead, and God is reminding Joshua here, hey Joshua, Moses is dead, let's get up and let's move on. And so the book of Joshua, some things you're going to find is that we should trust and obey God. Who believes that's important? Trust and obey God. There is victory to have when you go to battle trusting God's plan. There's victory, okay? But there's also failure when you get overly confident and not trust God. You're going to find that too. And we're going to learn how to value God's Word, okay? But there is a promise back in Genesis 12, and just for the sake of time, I've got this on the screen for you. Genesis 12, verse 1 through verse 3. God is fulfilling this. It's a progressive thing, but there's a promise made back in Genesis. It says, Now the Lord has said unto Abram, Get thee out of thy country and from thy kindred and from thy father's house unto land that I will show thee, and I will make of thee a great nation. I will bless thee. I will make thy name great, and thou shalt be a blessing. And I will bless them that bless thee, curse him that curseth thee, and in thee shall all families of the earth be blessed. That's still being carried out. God's been faithful in the book of Joshua. He's going to continue to be faithful in that. And so, one key thought, if you look at chapter 1 and verse 11, here's like really, I think, the key thought in this series. Notice this. Chapter 1, verse 11. Pass through the host and command the people, saying, Prepare you victuals, for within 3 days you shall pass over the Jordan to go and to possess the land which the Lord your God giveth you to possess. This is really a key thought in the book of Joshua, because God has promised things. We are to possess those things He's promised us. Okay? And have you read things in the New Testament? You do this, and I will bless you. And so there is obedience, and then there's blessings that follow. So we know God has blessed us with some things, but we have to possess them, and we have to lean into them, trust them, place our faith in what God has said. Now, there's two great parts to this. In the first 12 chapters, there's a conquest of the land. And chapter 12 through chapter 24 is the occupation of the land. So they're going to get there. That's pretty exciting, to be right where God wants you to be. Okay? So in chapter 1, so the first thing we're going to summarize is the first couple of chapters. I just want to get, what I love about this, it builds anticipation with what we're going to be seeing. It gets me excited about the book. And so number one, we're going to see God bringing Joshua to mobilize the army. Mobilize the army. And this summarizes chapter 1 and chapter 2. So look here for just a moment. The book opens up. Joshua, what's Joshua doing? Well, okay, that's true. What was the condition of Joshua? God told Joshua, Moses, my servant, is dead. Let's move forward. Think about Joshua for a second. I think this is important. You've got an individual that has seen a lot of things happen. A lot of things happen from exiting Egypt through traveling with Moses, seeing God use Moses in amazing ways. And now he is, and there's not been a time really in this that Moses wasn't there. Any time to do something great for God, Moses was there. Anything to be done to do it right, Moses was there following the Lord. Now Moses is not there. Do you think Joshua could possibly have felt a little bit just, man, can I do this? Moses isn't here anymore. He relied a lot upon Moses. Moses was a seasoned man. They're probably not as far as what a man accomplished for the Lord. I mean, Moses is one of those guys that stands out above the rest of all that God used him to do. It's pretty remarkable. So I think Joshua was mourning, I would think, humanly speaking. Moses is dead. How many think Joshua loved Moses dearly? How many think he enjoyed learning from Moses? Gaining wisdom. What do we do next, Moses? I mean, that's what I'd be asking if I was that Joshua with Moses, and he's not there anymore. Maybe you've had scenario. This right here gives you hope as well, that this would be like losing a mentor. Could be a Christian mentor. Could even be a parent. You've done life up to this point. They were here, and now they're not. You ever cross your mind, can I go on doing life right? Yes, you can. That's some great confidence because you walk with the Lord. And so I want us to back up for just a minute. I want you to see Joshua's inauguration because, he's to lead. But I think it's important to see this. Someone look up Numbers 27:19. Who wants to look that up for me? Numbers 27:19. Going. Somebody raise your hand. Help me out. Sharon. Deuteronomy 31, verses 1 through verse 8. Somebody. Oh, come on now. Okay. It's Deuteronomy 31. All right, I'll turn there. Go ahead and read Numbers 27:19. We want to see, the passing of the baton between Moses and Joshua. Joshua gets inaugurated, and that's what you find out. So go ahead and read that, Sharon. Okay, so he prepped Moses like Moses. There's going to be a time I want you to bring Joshua before the people, and we want the people to see that he is going to pick up where you leave off. That's important. Would you think? Why would you think that'd be important? I say it's important, but why would that be important? Exactly, and they see their current leader putting his full trust in the leader to be. Right? That's huge. Because later they'll say, we're going to follow you and do whatever the Lord wants. Right? Why is that? Well, this is why. Look at Deuteronomy. Just everybody turn there. Deuteronomy 31. I'll read this. It's fine. Verse 1 through verse 8. It says, And Moses went and spake these words unto all Israel, and he said unto them, I am 120 years old this day. I can no more go out and come in. Also the Lord hath said unto me, Thou shalt not go over this Jordan. The Lord thy God, he will go over before thee, and he will destroy these nations from before thee, and thou shalt possess them. And Joshua, he shall go over before thee, as the Lord hath said. And the Lord shall do unto them as he did unto Sihon and to Og, kings of the Amorites, and unto the land of them whom he destroyed. And the Lord shall give them up before your face, that ye may do unto them according to all the commandments which I have commanded you. Here's something familiar. Be strong and of a good courage. Okay? Fear not, nor be afraid of them, for the Lord thy God, he it is that doeth go with thee. He will not fail thee, nor forsake thee. And Moses called unto Joshua and said unto him in the sight of Israel, Be strong and of a good courage, for thou must go with this people unto the land which the Lord hath sworn unto your fathers to give them, and thou shalt cause them to inherit it. And the Lord, he it is, doth go before thee, he will be with thee, he will not fail thee, neither forsake thee, fear not, neither be dismayed. So I think as you go back to chapter 1, Joshua, I think, is in this moment of just reflecting and even mourning his mentor, and then God sort of jars his mind. And I think his mind goes back to this inauguration that, I remember, be strong, good courage, he's going to go with me, just like he did Moses. I can do this to the Lord. Look at verse 14. And the Lord said unto Moses in Deuteronomy 31, Behold, thy days approach that thou must die. Call Joshua and present yourself in the tabernacle of the congregation, that I may give him a charge. And Moses and Joshua went and presented themselves in the tabernacle of the congregation. And the Lord appeared in the tabernacle in a pillar of cloud. That's familiar, isn't it? That means something to the children of Israel. And the pillar of cloud stood over the door of the tabernacle. And the Lord said unto Moses, Behold, thou shalt sleep with thy fathers, and this people will rise up and go a-whoring after the gods of the strangers of the land, whither thou go to be among them, and will forsake them, and break my covenant which I have made with them. Then my anger shall be kindled against them in that day, and I will forsake them, and I will hide my face from them, and they shall be devoured, and many evils and troubles shall fall them, so that they will say in the day, Are not these evils come upon us, because our God is not among us? And I will surely hide my face in that day for all the evils which they shall have wrought, in that they are turned unto other gods. So you have to imagine, Joshua is remembering all of this in chapter 1. Here's the forecast of the people you're going to be leading when Moses dies. So don't you think Joshua's mind's pretty heavy when God speaks, like, hey, Joshua, my servant Moses is dead. It's time to get up and go. It's time to rally the army. We got to march forward, right? And so he's inaugurated. Why could not Moses go into the promised land? Really a couple reasons. Right. So it was disobedience. But there was something that Moses symbolized as a person as well that we don't need to forget. The law. So Moses represented the law, and Joshua, you go back to the meaning of his name, represents Christ. It's symbolic of Christ. You see this beautiful picture, how Christ takes you forward into blessing, into His will. And we know the promised land is a picture of God's perfect will. And so in chapter 2, we go back to our text in Joshua 1. You get into chapter 2, we enter into Jericho. How many is that probably everybody's, is that a favorite story or the favorite story in Scripture? Or is that one of your top favorites, the Battle of Jericho? I always loved that story as a kid, and I love it even more as an adult. But they enter in chapter 2, and the spies went to discover the strength of the city. But one thing I want you to see in Joshua 2 is verse 11, and then we'll move on. Look at verse 11. It says, As soon as we had heard these things, our heart did melt, neither did there remain any more courage in any man because of you. For the Lord your God, He is God in heaven above and in earth beneath. And so as we go through the book of Joshua, they're going to come to Jericho, and there's going to be some people, as these people are journeying to the promised land, there's going to be some people that's going to put their faith and trust in their God. Isn't that what life's all about? I mean, for the Christian, as you journey and follow God's will, that people see your good works and see your God. You see that great example as they journey and they go to Jericho. In chapter 3, 4, and 5, you're going to find that they're to march forward, marching forward. If you look in chapter 3 and verse 3, here's some things that we're going to be studying. It says, And they commanded the people, saying, When ye see the ark of the covenant of the Lord your God, and the priests and Levites bearing it, then ye shall remove from your place and go after it. So I got a question for you. What was so important about the ark of the covenant that He said when it gets up, it doesn't grow legs, but they pick it up with these rods on their shoulders and they carry it. What was so significant about it that they would need to follow? Exactly. The Lord's presence. So another thing, amazing thing that we're going to learn in the book of Joshua as we look in chapter 3 is that, hey, you want to be where God is. When you're not where God is, that's when problems happen. Okay? You follow the Lord wherever He's going. It's almost like if you approach a river and God's the stream and it's flowing this way, you want to get your boat and put it in the current and flow with Him. I mean, that's what you're going to learn in the book of Joshua. Okay? So that's what it represents. Martin Luther said this. He said, I know not the way He leads me, as we all sometimes like, which way? I don't know exactly. I know He's leading, but I'm a little curious. He went on to say this, but well do I know my guide. You ever been a little fuzzy about which way am I to go? But you know good and well that He's going to lead you the right way, right? So I love that quote. And one person said this, if God tells me to jump through a stone wall, it would be my duty to jump. It would be God's duty to remove the wall. I thought that was pretty clever. But Psalm 37 and verse 28 tells us this, the steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord, and He delighteth in His way. So we're going to learn that as we look in chapter 3. You follow God when He gets up and He moves, and you learn that also in chapter 4 and in chapter 5. But if you look at chapter 6, so thirdly, we see the fall of Jericho. In chapter 6, that's a couple things. What stands, let me just ask you this, just in summary, maybe one thing that sticks out to you about that particular story. Just one thing. The wall's falling. Maybe that's what it is. Nobody remembers the story. Some of you say, oh, I love that story. And like, I don't know what happened. What about God's plan to bring the walls down? Was that a little weird? As massive? And we'll get into more details as we study it verse by verse. A whole lot of faith. And you mean march around it one time 6 days, and on the seventh time 7 times? Like, what? And the army on top. And some guys, they like to estimate, and then maybe this is true. God understands the vibration of the voices and the trumpets together, that the vibration of that, would actually cause. Whether that's true, I don't know. All I know is God brought the walls down when they were obedient. But again, one thing that we'll see as we journey through Jericho and see the walls fall is that God's plan always works. God's plan always works. That's a great thing to learn. And then fourthly, we see this campaign of Ai, chapter 7 through chapter 8. We give a little summary on that. Anybody remember the story of the battle at Ai? You're afraid to raise your hand now, aren't you? Because I'm going to ask you some Done got you gun shy. What happened the first round they tried to go to Ai? What happened? Did they win or lose? They lost. And what did they figure out that allowed them to win the second time? Staying in the camp. And so we're going to see a journey of people that's going to learn that you can have all the military strategy you want. If you don't have obedience with it, it's useless. It's useless. You can strategize it to death, but if you're not following with obedience, it ain't going to work. You can't handle it just on your own. It's got to be the Lord. Zechariah chapter 4, verse 6. Here's a verse for you. Then he answered and spake unto him, saying, This is the word of the Lord unto Zerubbabel, saying, Not by might, nor by power, but by my Spirit, saith the Lord of hosts. That's how you got to go into battle. And so D.L. Moody says this. I think I've got this quote for you. D.L. Moody. Work as if everything depended upon you, and pray as if everything depended upon God. And I think you'll have a good balance in your life of being obedient and trusting the Lord. And so there you're going to see that through chapter 7 through chapter 8, this battle of Ai. And they win the second time around. And then chapter 10, as we look at this, number 5, we see this central campaign. So when they come to Kadesh Barnea, right, Joshua, and they enter into the most southern part of the promised land, and they head north. So they'll possess the southern part. Now they're getting to the central part, and then they'll go to the northern part. And so they defeat Ai on the second attempt. Okay. Then what happens? They're in this central campaign. The word travels so fast. Have you heard about the Israelites and their God, right? Now, if you think about news about this massive people and their God and what they've done, what they've accomplished, and you're all these kings out here in the northern part, what would you do to make sure that you kept your throne to yourself? You'd probably build an alliance, wouldn't you? Like, we need to band together and we need to take care of this. They brought fear to a lot of the Canaanite kings. If you'll look at chapter 10 and verse 7, you'll find the Gibeonites. They were a tricky group. So what you'll find in this chapter is that there's some people out there, even the devil's so good at this, to strategize their way into your life and then hurt you, okay? And they trick you. And that's what happened to the children of Israel. They come sort of in the guise of not being harmful or anything, being a good group to be in covenant with, and then they found out it was a mistake, and Joshua cursed them. You look at chapter 10 and verse 7, I believe that's where it is. Let's see here. So Joshua ascended from Gilgal, he and all the people of war, and let's see, with him and all the mighty men of valor. And the Lord said unto Joshua, Fear them not, for I have delivered them into thine hand. There shall not a man of them stand before thee. Joshua therefore came unto them suddenly, and went up from Gilgal all night. And the Lord discomfited them before Israel, slew them with a great slaughter at Gibeon, and chased them along the way that goeth unto Bethhoron, and smote them unto Azekah, unto Makkedesh. And it came to pass, as they fled from before Israel, and were in the going down of Bethhoron, that the Lord did cast down great stones from heaven upon them unto Azekah, and they died. They were more which died with hailstones than they whom the children of Israel slew with the sword. Then spake Joshua to the Lord in the day when the Lord delivered up the Amorites before the children of Israel, and said in the sight of Israel, Sun, stand thou still upon Gibeon, and thou, moon, in the valley of Ajalon. And the sun stood still, and the moon stayed unto the people, had avenged themselves upon their enemies. Is not this written in the book of Jasher? So the sun stood still in the midst of heaven, and cast not to go down about a whole day. And there was no day like that before it or after it, that the Lord hearkened to the voice of a man, for the Lord fought for Israel. And so you see this great miracle, even though, and here's the amazing thing, the deck may seem to be stacked against you as you're trying to follow the Lord, but you see God is always for you. And even God here caused the sun and the moon to prolong the day to give them victory. And I love that you're always on the winning side when you're following the Lord. And you see this great theme in the book of Joshua about that. And then sixthly, the northern campaign, as you look at chapter 11, here is something very interesting about this. Let me ask you a little bit of a pop quiz. When it did, and we'll get into this in just a minute, because I've got a slide for you to show the divisions of it. But real quick, did God tell Joshua to divide the northern kingdom after they possessed it or before? Before. Good job, Mike. I knew somebody had the right answer. To divide the land before they possessed it. And what you're going to learn as you look in chapter 11 in this northern campaign is this, is that you're able to claim the promises of God by faith before you may possess them physically, or they're materialized in your life. You claim them by faith as if they're already there, right? The Bible says to pray, nothing wavering, not doubting, but as if it's happened. We're told to pray like that for the sick and for others, right? The prayer of faith will save the sick. And so we see that great example in chapter 11 as they go to the northern part of Israel. And here's something. We looked at this in the book of Revelation. Ever since Israel has possessed all this land, there's been so many people throughout history going after it. Would you agree? Notice some historical numbers behind me on the screen. The Crusaders, AD 1099 to 1250. How much bloodshed happened through the time of the Crusaders? Much blood in possessing land. You got 1917, General Edmund Henry Hinman Allenby led a victorious battle over the Turkish armies for the land. 1948 is when Jewish settlers fought hard to establish Jerusalem as the capital of the state of Israel. 1967, the Six-Day War brought about the end of a 20-year division there in Israel. And folks, it's going to continue to be like that. It was then like that then. It's that way now. And but the Bible tells us in Luke that there's going to be a king descend from heaven that's going to go to the throne here, materialize on the earth, and it's his, and he's going to set up his kingdom. There'll be no fighting over it. He will bring it to himself. And then lastly, summarizing chapter 12 to verse 24, give you an overview of this. The land is finally at rest. I love that because they've been battling. They're going to find they're battling all the way through all the way through Joshua, and the battle will eventually come to rest. I mean, a lot of this won't be fulfilled till you get to David, right? So there's still things to be done. But there is rest. And Joshua becomes an old man. He's going to be about 90 years old. And he realizes at 90 years of age as well that there's still much to conquer. Okay? So the land is going to find its place of being at rest. And aren't you thankful that as you're following God, wherever He's calling you to be, His perfect will for your life, you can find rest there? When you knew you were in God's perfect will, was it not a restful place? It doesn't mean the battle's over, but there's solace, there's peace, there's comfort. And so we see that illustrated. But there's still much land to be possessed. So we understand this as we go through these chapters, is this: even though you're in God's perfect will, you're conquering things through His power each step of the way, but there's still more things to possess. There's still more battles to face. There's still more places ahead of you that He wants you to be in His will. So we rest, we thank God for it, but we keep our sword and we keep our shield, right? And we keep going on. And we see that. In chapter 14, he's going to talk about the priesthood. And I love this. Look at Joshua 14. Caleb's inheritance. This is a unique unique thing we'll learn from Caleb's life. They're there in the land. And Caleb could have went somewhere more restful, like already conquered. But Joshua 14 and verse 12 says this. Now therefore give me this mountain whereof the Lord spake in that day, for thou heardest in that day how the Anakims were there, and that the cities were great and fenced. If so be the Lord will be with me, then I shall be able to drive them out, as the Lord said. Did you catch the application for your life there? If the Lord said this for my life, and I'm obedient, and I go forward, He'll give it to me like He's promised. Right? And that was a promise to Caleb. And so what we learn from this is contrary to culture. The Christian life's hard work. Who would agree to that? You're going to see that all through Joshua. The Christian life is hard work. We're never promised easy service. I'm not going to spend time reading these verses, but Jesus told us in John, you're going to have tribulation, right? I'm bringing peace, but you're going to have tribulation on this earth. Paul told Timothy, what did he tell him? Be a good soldier. War a good warfare, right? He told him that. I want to give you a quote and a true story and just sort of wrap this up. Dr. J. Wilbur Chapman asked General William Booth, does that ring a bell? Salvation Army, right? He said, tell me, I think I've got this on the screen, tell me what has been tell me what has been the secret of your success all the way through. General Booth replied, I will tell you the secret. God has had all there was of me. That is a thread through the book of Joshua. You let God have all of you, and He will give you victory. He'll give you courage. He'll give you strength. He'll provide peace. You got to give Him all of you. And you're going to see that through this book. Helen Keller, I come across this story today. Helen Keller had a teacher, and the teacher had this comment about Helen Keller. She was deaf and blind, but a remarkable woman in what she wrote and her influence. But they said she was the happiest student they've ever had. And it was a credit to the fact that because she had to conquer so much. I'll tell you, there's nothing that feels better than to go into, life with the Lord and conquer a circumstance, a trial, a temptation, or whatever it may be, with the Lord through divine help, and come out on the other end knowing God had all of you, and you got through it, and you come out on top of that, on that situation. That's a great feeling. You can't just lay over and die. You got to keep your boots on, and you got to keep marching. That's the book of Joshua. And that's what we're going to learn. We're going to see that. Horace Mann said this. You ought to write this down. Horace Mann said this. Difficulties are things which show what men are. Difficulties. Okay. There's other verses we could look in summarizing this, but when you go on over to Joshua 24, there's a couple verses that's the famous verses of Joshua. Okay, anybody guess what they are? Two verses. It's verse 14. Yeah. Verse 14 and verse 15. Okay, Joshua is now at this point of being able to say this with authority. But as we look at this panoramic view, you get this picture of how he can say this, and he's challenging the people. And so he gives this farewell. But in verse 14, it says, Now therefore fear the Lord and serve him in sincerity and in truth. Put away the gods which your fathers served on the other side of the flood and in Egypt, and serve ye the Lord. How many of you think when he said this, he remembered what God was telling him and Moses before Moses died? This people is going to break the covenant. They're going to worship false gods. They're going to, same people. So Joshua was being very redundant, giving him a challenge in his farewell address. I think this makes a lot of sense. And if it seem evil unto you to serve the Lord, choose you this day whom ye will serve. Whether the gods which your fathers served, that were on the other side of the flood, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land ye dwell. But as for me and my house, what did he say? We will serve the Lord, which gives us the understanding that you've got to make the decision for you in your own home. But it starts with you. Your home will never follow the Lord if you're not. You can't expect to hold your family to a bar if you're not committing that first. And I think one thing Joshua helps us understand as well is that it makes a big difference to publicly declare it. When someone trusts Christ, Romans 10, 9 and 10, right? You believe in the heart, you confess with the mouth. There's assurance and confidence and a testimony in that. You declare it. If you really mean what you believe, you'll let it come out of your mouth. And that's what Joshua was saying. I'm calling you to speak what you truly believe. Choose you this day. I'm going to tell you that me and my house, that everybody know that we serve the Lord. And to give you another perspective as we close, the land of Israel, after they possess it, or they'll continue to work on possessing it after the book of Joshua, but they are still in the center of resistance, enemies, hardship. It's going to be a battle. Let me give you a perspective. Look at the screen. Notice the boundary. So the promised land is 180 miles long, 40 miles wide. That's what they were going into. And here is who all was all around them. Egypt was 300 miles to the south. Nineveh was 700 miles northeast. Babylon, 700 miles east. Persia, 1,000 miles east. Greece, 800 miles northwest. And Rome, 1,500 miles northwest. How many of you think they were surrounded by hardship? And they still are, right? So we get this grand picture of just seeing the geographical locations of their opposition, that being in God's will is going to be a battle. It's not going to be easy because you're always going to have an adversary. You're being surrounded by an adversary all the time. The devil uses people just like God, right? And he will use them in a very slick way. And so understand this. Henrietta C. Mears said it this way: it's not enough to light a fire, you must put fuel on it. You need to flame up brightly and keep it going, right? Or that flame will die. So as you look at this, I'm excited to go through this with you. We've looked at bits and pieces, and this is the book we're studying. And so we'll be going a little bit further into chapter 1. We'll pick up a little deeper into chapter 1 the next time we're together. But I'm excited about it. I'm looking forward. I appreciate you picking out the book of Joshua, Miss Arb. It's going to be fun. Anybody got anything to add as we looked at this sort of panoramic, this 30,000-foot view?